Good evening and welcome. I am Juan Edghill Jr. Thanks to all those who are joining us.
Good evening, I am Roodi Balgobin, and thank you for those of you joining us for the very first time on This Week in 60 Minutes.
Well, this evening we look at a very clear hit and miss by yet another APNU AFC coalition official, Ms. Annette Ferguson, a junior minister in the coalition government. Well, she had claimed that she only got one plot of land. However, hours after her claims, the PPPC released the footage that supports his position and makes clear that this is another scandal where the questions remain unanswered. Now, Rudy, it was this APNU AFC coalition leader, Mr. David Granger, who in an October 27, 2019 interview said, and I quote, "We need to have ministers and public officials who are incorruptible. The people of Guyana must be satisfied that their ministers are honest. I am against corruption personally, and I am confident that my government is against corruption." Unquote.
Very interesting words from him there, but we would all remember that in 2018, the United States of America report for the first time on narcotics controls strategy report, that is, in 2018 for the first time named government corruption in their report as a major source of money laundering. That was the first time in contemporary history that the report named government corruption as the source of the money laundering. Granger, in an interview, tried to deflect from this issue of corruption by speaking about other things. In that interview, he said, and I quote, "To the extent that the corruption, to the extent that there is trafficking in person, to the extent that it is smuggling or contraband activities, these are other forms of corruption." So basically, he was just trying to deflect from dealing with the issue and dealing with the subject of corruption and his government being named in government corruption being named in that report.
We don't know if the president himself has declared his assets to the Integrity Commission. So now we have the head of the coalition government who has said a lot of things about corruption, and they frequently like to say that the PPPC government was very corrupt. But these are the same officials now that are not declaring their assets. They're telling blatant lies that can be verified. And it is as if they expect Guyanese just to believe what they are saying. But it is clear as day that this government is not about good governance, accountability and transparency.
In fact, if one was to look back at the history from since they were in opposition to Parliament when the Integrity Commission was created by former President Barry Jagdeo, you would see that the current government, those members who are now formed the government, when they were in opposition, they never submitted their returns as well. So they have a long history of hiding and trying to deflect from the issues, especially where corruption is concerned. Now we know in 2015 that they went on a campaign preaching change and preaching that the coalition, that the PPPC government was corrupt. However, in office, they spent tens of millions, of our taxpayers' dollars to try and did a few audits to say that they're going to find corruption, they're going to jail PP members, former cabinet members, and so forth, and they were unable to find any acts of corruption, and it just points out that it's a blatant lie.
You actually just jogged my memory as well, because I do recall that one of the justifications that they had for raising their salaries by 50% was so that the ministers would not fall into corruption. But we can ask ourselves if this plot has really worked.
It was the president who gave that explanation himself. He said that my ministers have been working for so much, and now I need to raise their salaries because they used to earn so much in the private sector that I don't want them to be corrupt, that I'm going to go ahead and give them 50% and make it retroactive to the first day that they took office.
So they got a huge payout there. But we also have to look at other institutions just before we move on. The Public Procurement Commission and how they have blatantly violated the procurement laws of this country by bypassing a lot of our procurement practices and so forth. This government, they were the ones who were saying that they would come into office and they would do this, they would do that, but they're doing the exact opposite, I would say. Many people would say that Guyana, we're full of corruption and so on, but the PPPC would have left some framework in place to guard against a lot of these acts and a lot of these corrupt practices that we're seeing occurring right now.
Exactly.
But when we have leaders that don't have integrity, you know, this is the result that we're seeing under this government right now.
Definitely.
So, in all of this, the position of the PNCR-led coalition government is that it is satisfied with its performance moving ahead since taking office in 2015. So they've said openly that they are very proud of their record, and over the past few weeks we've been looking at their Our Record website, where they have lamented through the regions their accomplishments, which we have pointed out are a lot of them are PPPC projects, initiatives, etc. But they're saying that they're very proud of it. But among they're very proud of it, especially among young people. And this claim is not sitting well with a lot of sections of society, especially when we look at the reality at what is taking place in our country.
Well, the reality that one is speaking there about is, for one, is unemployment.
Yes.
And we can take a look at some of the facts. This week we saw the release of the UNDP's Human Development Report for 2019, which looked at inequalities in human development in the 21st century. And in that report, it made it clear that unemployment among youths ages 15 to 24 stands at almost 23% in Ghana. That is 23% of youths between the ages of 15 to 24 are currently unemployed in Ghana. Additionally, the report went on to say that youths not in school or not employed, ages 15 to 24, stands at 35.2%. Now, we went through all most of the regions already, and we discussed, we saw under the education system there that the government boasting that, oh, they would have done so much for youth and they would have done so much for the education sector. But here we have an independent report from a credible organization, the UNDP, saying that 35.2% of our youths are not in school.
Or employed. That means they're just on the road corner.
Just on the road corner.
Or doing nothing productive with their lives. But one of the things really that this government would have done shortly after getting into power was to fire approximately 2,000 Amerindian youths who were operating as CSOs in the villages in the hinterland region. And we did give the estimation that that accounts for about $800 million lost over the past 4 years to the village economy, and what it would have impacted on the business community in those villages. So we can see that the unemployment, a policy of this government was to fire about 1,972 young CSOs in the villages.
And we know this spin-off effect from also firing almost 7,500 sugar workers as well. The leader of the opposition, our General Secretary, Dr. Barry Jagdeo, as well as our presidential candidate, have been speaking on this issue on numerous occasions, highlighting the fact that we have had over 30,000 persons lost their jobs since the coalition took office in 2015. And this is very worrying. Yes, very worrying. Among those, we have here 23% and 35% respectively of youths not in school, not employed. So these are all very worrying trends for Ghana.
But some good news is that the PPPC has now promised to rehire those CSOs who were fired by the APNU AFC administration, and not only rehire them but to increase the payment that they were getting under the PPPC prior to 2015. So
as well as to
good news in the manifesto.
As well as to reopen the sugar estates and keep those sugar workers, them working, or getting them new jobs for the ones that you can't reopen. As we know, there have been several plots to sell out these estates and sell out the lands that belongs to the estate and stuff like that. So the presidential candidate has already taken a promise to reopen the sugar estate that he can, and to also pay from the treasury to sugar workers until we can find jobs for them. And of course, we have mentioned before many times on the program that there's also a plan to create 50,000 jobs in Guyana within the 5 years period. And just last week, the leader of the opposition said that this is a very mild estimation. He believes it can be a lot more, and he highlighted several areas. Just to give an example, several areas in where employment can be created right here in Ghana.
That's excellent. Now, these statistics that, Roodi, you would have pointed out, they have not even been addressed as yet by the APNU AFC coalition. Instead, we see them planning a so-called quote-unquote youth summit that is devoid of even youth speakers.
Yeah, I have a copy here of the flyer which says, yes, Youth Empowerment Summit. This will be taking place in Linden primarily. It's at West Watuka Guest House in Mackenzie, Linden. What is interesting to note though is that the Youth Summit is being held by an organization called Youth Forward Movement in collaboration with the government of Ghana.
The government?
Yes, in collaboration with the government of Ghana. And they're holding a Youth Empowerment Summit, symposium and reception with ministers, regional officials, and David Granger.
Yeah, so the question that strikes out there, or one might see after seeing that flyer, is who is funding this summit?
Exactly.
Because if it's collaborating with the government of Guyana, is my taxpayer dollars or your taxpayers' dollars being used to fund a youth summit for political purposes? And this is something that Guyanese have to ask themselves. Why is my taxpaying dollars being used to fund a summit to let AP and AFC spread lies once again to young people?
Exactly. And you know, youths are always on social media, they're always on Facebook. If you were to do a search on Facebook for Youth Forward Movement, you'd see that it was recently created a page. There's been no mention of such an organization, Youth Forward Movement. They have about 30 likes on that page alone. Wow. And it's only photographs of David Granger, photographs of Amna Ali, photographs of Walter Lawrence, and these are some of the key speakers, the youths in government that will be speaking to the youths at this forum. And so an organization that has no following, no basis, just out of the blue spring up, those are very important questions, because I want to say that I believe that the government is handing over money to whoever these individuals are behind this, and these monies will be stolen for campaign purposes.
Yes, well, I think more specifically, Roodi, young people really have to be careful with what they are going to, what they're believing by this coalition government, because, I mean, on the 2 months before, 2+ months before election, now once again we're seeing that young people are suddenly important again. And this has always been the practice of the PNC slash APNU AFC. Now that in 2015 when they won the elections, we saw one thing that they did. There was no longer a ministry of specifically focused on youth. It was segmented into a department, and you know, the youth focus was really pushed aside, I would say. So young people, we know, were front and center of the elections in 2015, right? Young people were excited about it. You know, they were pushing and everything.
The entire campaign to vote for change and vote
exactly,
like a boss.
Vote like a boss and everything else. But then after, you know, the elections, we didn't even see a youth minister, I would say. You know, one would have expected a lot of the leaders that were pushing at that time to get ahead, but not even those leaders were pushed. So young people can ask themselves, what do you really have to look forward to if you're supporting the APNU AFC? You know, they really find their older folks to be more preferred to be in certain specific government leading positions and so forth.
That reminds me of the leaked email from from Basil Williams, where he said that oh, the youths, don't worry about them, that when it comes close to the elections, we'll just hold a few parties, bring in a few RTs, buy some beers and give it to them, and they'll vote for us again. Also, the government policy of dealing with youths, you have the president himself where he went and basically lambasted the youth, saying that, oh, the reason you guys are unemployed is because you go to the Guinness bar and drink out your money and spend time there. Rather than looking at the core issue, that is that his government has failed to provide any sort of opportunities for the youth, has failed to provide employment, but rather has taken away jobs from youth. And these numbers don't lie. 23% of youths in Guyana, ages 15 to 24, are currently employed. This is the highest it's been pre-1992. Since from 1992 to 2015, this number is the highest, 23%. It's never been this high.
And added to unemployment, I would say the hardships that they've put on young people, because you do recall that it was under this APNU AFC government that put VAT on data services.
Definitely.
And who is which section of society are the highest users of data services? It's young people like you and me who are on our phones. We're on Facebook, we're on Instagram, we're on Twitter, Snapchat. We use all the services. And this government, who so-called cares about young people, they're going to go and put VAT on data services. Now, the PPPC has obviously promised to reverse this and ensure that data services don't attract VAT anymore. But it just lets me know that this government does not have any vision for young people. They don't have the interests of young people at heart if they're going to put VAT on data services. Like, you're trying to, subject the young people, and I don't take it very kindly to them putting VAT on data services.
Definitely. They have failed in terms of providing youth, or Granger like to say, oh, you should become your own entrepreneurs. However, they have failed to provide any sort of policy or give any clear direction. In fact, as we were speaking about VAT, they have placed VAT on electricity. Yes. So if you're thinking about starting a new business and you have to rent a place, first of all, you have to pay rent, or unless you have your own place, then you're very lucky. But your operation cost goes up automatically. As a youth, it's very high, very hard to be able to sustain a business, and then there's no help from the government as well. Yes. Zero help from the government. So clearly the government has no policy to help youth. They have no vision, and they're going to come to you again now because it's election with fake promises. Nothing but fake promises. And again, the youths are all of a sudden important to everyone.
Yes.
In the government, and that's why they have this forum where they want to show youths that they care for them and try to fool them again into voting for them.
Yeah, speaking of not providing incentives, they took away the 10,000 cash grant from the children, and young parents specifically who have young kids, this really, really assisted them. I was speaking with someone from a community in South Georgetown, and she was saying to me, she really misses it because it would really help her when school was reopening and so on and so forth. So the PPPC has promised to also reinstitute this $10,000 cash grant to the parents. So young parents who need this extra support, they will have something to look forward to, and not only 10,000, but they're looking to also increase it. I would say incrementally as the years go by. Also, if we look at land allocation, this is something very important to young people as well. We began the program talking about a particular minister and how she got several plots of land there, but young people have not been able to access lands. And we are looking to develop about I think it's 50,000 house lots. I think it's about 50,000 house lots over the next 5 years. And this is something I would say big for young people. This is something key because young people want to own their own homes. Young people want to they want to develop themselves, and this is one way that the PPPC is making things available to our young people. Not just giving false promises, fake promises, and so on.
Another thing I like to touch on, as you mentioned earlier, that the ICT sector is something very important to young people and for businesses that are coming up. In the manifesto excerpt, which was launched a few weeks ago, under the heading ITC Connecting Every Guyanese to the Future, there are several promises here that the PPPC government is promising to do if re-elected. One of those is increasing ITC literacy by providing schools with appropriate equipment and software, reforming school curricula for the development of ICT proficiencies, providing incentives for training in ICT, providing community-based training for the use of computers, establishing an International Institute of Technology in Guyana. Now, we all know that the PPPC government would have started this already when they had the one laptop per family drive. This government disbanded that and started something where they called it one laptop for teacher. And then I don't think that's even functioning currently. So apart from that, the PPP is also promising, as you mentioned, access to cheaper data and bandwidth by liberalizing the telecommunications sector, allowing more fiber optic cables to be terminated in Guyana, scaling up state response efforts to provide countrywide coverage with fiber optic cables and other wireless options to ensure subsidized access to poor and remote households, the medium through which every household, including poor ones, will be able to connect to the internet will be a reinstated one laptop per family program.
Excellent.
And removing VAT on data, as you mentioned earlier. So these are just some of the promises that young people can look forward to as it relates to policies that impact directly on youth from a new...
Let me tell you what this would help with, Roodi. You have a rural area, someone is there, and they don't have access to to come to Georgetown to go to UG. The PPPC is promising 20,000 online scholarships.
Definitely.
Now, what this would provide, you have internet in your rural community. You can actually complete a certificate program, a diploma program, a degree program. From where you are, maybe you'd have to just make short visits and stints, but you can actually, get educated via this 20,000 online scholarship program. And I think that that's why the PPPC is looking to have the ICT sector so expanded, so that persons in the rural communities and also in the urban communities, they can have access to these scholarships and so on and so forth. So you can work and you can study as well.
Exactly.
And I think this is where education is actually moving towards. We can't just expect all young people, to afford education, where they can just go to university day and night. But the PPPC understands that, many young people want to work and go to school as well.
Exactly.
So, this would create the avenue for this to happen.
Definitely. With that said, we'd just like to give you some brief updates on what took place at GCOM. Yesterday, the commission met. There were no major decisions as it relates to some very pressing issues there at GCOM. That is what use would be made of the house-to-house data, and also what decision they're going to take as it relates to those persons who have not uplifted their ID cards as yet. However, they are meeting today again, and hopefully we can get some clarity on this issue, because as we know, nomination day is set for January 10th. And in this regard, the PP has been working very hard to get everything in order for that day, nomination day. However, also the commission has promised that they would have the revised list of electors, which will then give us the official list of electors published by January 6th. So that it can go through the process, the statutory process, and then we'll get the official list of electors. So we are hoping that sometime soon we'll get some decisions coming out of GCOM. Next week we'll be providing you with more details as it relates to GCOM and what's happening
and
there.
Lowenfield, we have to mention that Mr. Kid Lowenfield, his contract was renewed.
Oh yes, and renewed for another 3 years yesterday. Of course, the PP nominated commissioner abstained from that vote, and the chairwoman along with the government nominated commissioners are the ones that voted in favor of his contract being renewed. Which is kind of strange, because the government nominated commissioners were arguing that he needs to go off and take his leave because he has leave accumulated for this period and so on, and now in a full swing of everything voted to have his contract renewed without even mentioning that, would he be going off on leave or what would take place. However, as I said, next week we'd have more as it relates to GCOM and what's happening there. Now, with all that we have discussed and all that we have said, Juan, I'd just like to go over a few things. One of which is that we are on the campaign trail already. There will be public meetings, and these are some questions that young people should ask themselves. Very important question. Those are the policies and programs making a difference in the lives of young people? Are policies and programs generating more income for our young people? Are our policies and programs improving the well-being of our people? Are policies and programs expanding social and economic goods and improving services? How are the policies and programs impacting the pockets and bank accounts of our people? So these are just some basic questions you should ask yourself when you hear all these promises and all these lofty speeches that you'll be hearing over the next coming months just before the elections.
And I'm sure that they'll have a lot more youth summits. I'm sure that they'll have a lot more youth, quote-unquote, interactions. They want to hear your vision. They want to see your ideas. And of course, under the APNU AFC, none of these things would come to reality because they don't have young people at heart. Their record over the past 4+ years has shown this, Rudy, they can be trusted.
As we
That's all
always
we can
say,
say.
as we
They
always
can be
say
trusted.
on the program is, don't vote race, don't vote because your parents tell you to vote,
Yes.
or because you're traditionally voted for one party or another. Just look at the track record, look at the policies, look at the manifesto, go through them in detail. Young people are very educated, they have a talent for these things. Go through them, research them, ask yourself the questions which I outlined before, and then make an informed decision. And then you would see that the PP have a track record. Many young people prior to 2015 were saying, oh, well, you know, we can't compare because we don't know what the PNC was like. We were born before they were in, after they would have demitted office, and 23 years of the PPP. So now you've had a chance to compare, and you've had a chance to see what their policies are, what their track record are, and you can compare now.
Yeah, well, really, one of the things that I wanna point out as well is the diverse team that the PPPC has going into this election.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you really can't look past that, because once you see, you know, young people, you see older folks, people of all races, people of all religions, ethnicities, you know, the makeup of that team is very, very dynamic. You know, you have nurses, you have teachers, you have businessmen, you have traditional politicians, you know, you have people who have never been in politics coming forward. So the diverse mix in the team. And, you know, when I look at that Youth Summit flyer, you know, one thing is I saw predominantly one race, and, you know,
Yes.
the PPPC is not like that. You know, it's very diverse in who it's putting forward and so on, because we have to hear views from everyone. You know, we can't just lock a segment out of governance in this country, and that is what APNU did when they got to office in 2015. Young people were basically put in a closet, and the closet door was locked. We didn't have any say in government, I would say. But come next year, March 2nd, 2020, things will change for young people, definitely.
And definitely will change, and we have a lot of women involved in the campaign
Yes, we
now.
do.
Traditionally,
Yes, how can I forget
it's been
How
a
can I
lot
forget
of
that?
men in politics, but we
How
have
can I
seen a
forget?
lot of
A lot
women
of
joining
women
the
have
team.
come
In
forward,
fact,
yes.
I'd just like to say a special thank you to all of those volunteers and
Yes,
party
we
members
do.
and supporters and well-wishers, predominantly women who have been out in the fields working, sharing the manifesto excerpt, helping along with the TV program. As everyone know, our producers.
Our
also.
producer's a woman. I was just going to say that. You beat me to it.
So thank you guys, and it's been a lot of hard work they've been putting in
Yes.
and working sometimes
Excellent
even
work.
13, 14
Excellent
hours per
work.
day.
Excellent
Yeah.
work from a woman.
With that said, we'll just like to say thank you for joining us this week on our program. We hope to see you next week.
Yes.
Of course, you can find our program on our Facebook page, This Week in 60 Minutes, where you can rewatch it at any time or share it with a friend, and we encourage you to do so. We'd also like to remind you to pick up a copy of the Mirror newspaper, where you can read about these issues which we've just highlighted and a lot more. Good night.
Yes, good evening. See you next week.